Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the gold-ranked sage who married the sword. Maiden, Naruto X Sword Maiden, Goblin Slayer. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Golden Stranger. Blood splattered across ancient stone as the hooded figures continued their chant. 13 cultists formed a perfect circle within the underground chamber, their synchronized voices echoing against damp walls covered in symbols no local scholar could decipher. At the center of their formation lay an intricate array of runes, glowing with sickly purple energy that pulsed in rhythm with their words. The sacrifice, a young woman with tears streaming down her dirt-smeared face, struggled against her bonds. Her muffled screams went unheard behind the cloth gag as the lead cultist raised a ceremonial dagger overhead, its jagged edge gleaming in the torchlight. "The boundary thins," he intoned, voice rising above the others. "Great ones beyond the veil, accept our offering and grant passage to your herald." The blade descended. Before it could pierce flesh, the chamber erupted with blinding light. The rune array cracked like glass, energy spiraling upward in a violent vortex. Cultists screamed as an invisible force slammed them against the walls. The very air seemed to split open, reality tearing along an unseen seam as the failed ritual collapsed in on itself. Through this rift between worlds fell a man. He crashed onto the stone floor where the sacrifice had been moments before, his arrival scattering the ritual components. Golden light pulsed around him before fading, revealing a figure unlike any in this realm. Blonde hair framed a face marked with 6 whisker-like scars. His attire, orange and black with unfamiliar symbols, was torn and scorched, evidence of some recent battle. For several heartbeats, he remained motionless, seemingly unconscious. Then his eyes snapped open, revealing irises of startling blue that quickly scanned his surroundings with tactical precision. Naruto Uzumaki rose to one knee, hands automatically forming a defensive position. His head pounded with disorientation. The last thing he remembered was sealing Kagaya. Then a blinding flash as dimensions collapsed. Now he found himself in some underground chamber with strangers in robes scrambling to their feet, expressions shifting from shock to fear to calculation. "The ritual worked," whispered one cultist, awe in his voice. "But this is not the herald we sought." The leader narrowed his eyes. "It matters not. Any being powerful enough to cross dimensions will serve our purpose." Naruto assessed the situation with veteran instincts honed through years of combat. 13 opponents. Confined space. One civilian hostage now cowering against the far wall. The metallic scent of blood and the residual energy signature of something like a summoning jutsu gone wrong. "I don't know who you are," Naruto said, his voice steady despite the lingering disorientation. "But I can guess what you were trying to do. Nothing good comes from sacrificing innocent people." The leader sneered. "You understand nothing, outsider. The Whisper King demands tribute, and you have interrupted sacred." His words cut off as Naruto vanished in a blur of movement, reappearing behind the leader with kunai pressed against his throat. "I understand enough," Naruto said quietly. "Release the woman." What followed wasn't a battle so much as a demonstration. As cultists charged with daggers and crude magic, Naruto moved among them like wind through grass. No movement wasted, no strike without purpose. He fought with the efficiency of someone who had faced far worse threats, careful to incapacitate rather than kill despite the lethal intent directed at him. When the last cultist fell unconscious, Naruto approached the bound woman, his movements deliberately slow and unthreatening. "It's okay," he said, gently removing her gag and cutting her bonds with a kunai. "You're safe now. Can you tell me where we are?" The woman stared at him with wide eyes. The old temple ruins, north of Frontier Town." Her voice shook. "Who are you? How did you move like that?" Naruto helped her to her feet, noticing how she flinched at his touch despite his care. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki. As for how I move," he offered a small smile. "Let's just say I've had a lot of practice." Something in his expression, the genuine concern, perhaps, or the absence of pity, seemed to calm her. She attempted to return his smile, though it wavered. "I'm Elaine. Those men, they took me from the fields 3 days ago. Said I was unmarked by the gods, and perfect for their ritual. She shuddered. If you hadn't appeared. But I did, Naruto said firmly. And now we need to get you somewhere safe. This, frontier town, is it close? Elaine nodded. Half a day's walk south. But the forest between here and there, it's not safe after dark. Naruto glanced at the unconscious cultists. Neither is staying here. They'll wake eventually. He created a shadow clone without hand signs, the duplicate materializing beside him in a puff of smoke. This clone will gather evidence about what they were doing while we head for town. Elaine gasped, stumbling backward. What manner of magic is that? Where I come from, it's called a shadow clone jutsu. Naruto realized his casual display had frightened her. I'm sorry, I should have warned you. It's harmless, just a copy of myself that can act independently. You're not from around here at all, are you? She asked, studying him with newfound curiosity overtaking her fear. That, Naruto said with a rueful smile, is putting it mildly. The forest sprawled before them, ancient trees stretching toward the dusky sky. Naruto adapted quickly to his surroundings, senses heightened as they navigated the increasingly dark woodland. Something felt fundamentally different about this world. Natural energy flowed in patterns unlike anything he'd experienced, yet he could still sense and interact with it. Stay close, he instructed Elaine as they moved through the underbrush. There's something. He paused, head tilting slightly. We're being watched. Goblins, Elaine whispered, voice tight with fear. They hunt in packs at night. Naruto nodded, having extracted basic information about this world's threats during their journey. Small, green-skinned creatures with malicious intelligence and a particular cruelty toward women. Not especially dangerous individually, but cunning and numerous. How many can you sense? Elaine asked. 12, no, 15, Naruto replied, surprising himself with how clearly he could detect their presences despite never encountering their kind before. His affinity for natural energy seemed even stronger in this realm. A rustle in the bushes ahead confirmed his assessment. Red eyes gleamed in the darkness, accompanied by the soft scrape of crude weapons against leather. Can you fight? Naruto asked quietly. Elaine shook her head, trembling. I'm just a farmer's daughter. Then stay behind me. Naruto reached into his pouch. Relieved to find his equipment had survived the dimensional transfer. When I move, run straight through the path I clear. Don't stop until you reach those large rocks we passed earlier. I'll find you. Before she could respond, the forest erupted with motion as goblins swarmed from their hiding places, howling battle cries in their guttural language. Their ambush formation suggested experience ND planning. This was no random encounter but a well-executed trap. Naruto met their charge with practiced calm, 3 kunai finding targets before the first goblin reached him. He moved like liquid between their attacks, each strike precise and efficient. One goblin managed to slash his arm with a rusted blade, drawing blood that seemed to drive the creatures into a frenzy. Go now, he shouted to Elaine, creating an opening with a sweeping kick that cleared the path. As she fled, Naruto's eyes narrowed. These creatures fought with surprising coordination, using tactics to separate him from Elaine rather than simply attacking mindlessly. Their intelligence made them more dangerous than their small stature suggested. Time to show them what they were dealing with. Chakra surged through his system as he formed a familiar hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 10 perfect copies materialized around him, each drawing weapons and assuming battle stances. The goblins faltered, primitive minds, struggling to comprehend the sudden multiplication of their prey. What followed was methodical elimination. Naruto and his clones moved through the goblin pack with ruthless efficiency, disabling opponents with targeted strikes to joints and nerve centers. He observed their fighting style, noting their tendency to target vulnerable areas and use overwhelming numbers. When the last goblin fell, Naruto dispelled his clones and tracked Elaine's trail to the rocky outcropping where she huddled, wide-eyed. All clear, he said gently. They won't bother anyone else. You killed them all? She asked, voice small. Naruto shook his head. Incapacitated them. I don't kill unnecessarily. Her expression shifted from relief to confusion. But they're goblins. They'll recover and attack others if left alive. This gave Naruto pause. His shinobi code had always emphasized discernment, evaluating threats based on intelligence, intent, and capacity for change. These creatures, from Elaine's description and his own observations, seemed to exist purely to prey on others. In your experience, he asked carefully, can goblins be reasoned with? Did they ever coexist peacefully with humans? Elaine's bitter laugh held no humor. The only good goblin is a dead goblin. Ask anyone who's survived an attack. Naruto frowned, the weight of cultural difference settling uncomfortably on his shoulders. He would need to learn more about this world's realities before imposing his own ethical framework. We should move, he said finally. Those cultists might send others searching for us. As they continued toward Frontier Town, the moons, 2 of them, Naruto noted with fascination, rose above the treeline, bathing the forest in silver light. Frontier Town greeted dawn with the methodical routine of a settlement accustomed to existing on civilization's edge. Guards exchanged shifts at the wooden palisade walls, merchants prepared stalls in the central square, and adventurers nursed hangovers or polished equipment in preparation for the day's quests. Naruto and Elaine arrived as the gates opened, their appearance drawing curious stares from the gatekeepers. A blood-smeared woman, accompanied by a strangely dressed blonde man with foreign features, was unusual even by frontier standards. Elaine, one guard stepped forward, recognition in his voice. By the Earth Mother, we thought you were dead. Your father's been searching the forests for days. I would have been, if not for him, she replied, gesturing toward Naruto. He saved me from cultists in the old temple ruins. The guard's attention shifted to Naruto, evaluating him with professional scrutiny. You took on the cult alone? Asked the older guard, skepticism evident. We've lost 3 adventuring parties investigating their activities. Before Naruto could respond, Elaine interjected. He did more than that. He appeared from nowhere in a flash of light, moved faster than sight, and created copies of himself with strange magic. The guards exchanged glances. You'll want to register at the guild, the younger one said finally. Adventurer or not, there's reward money for information on the cult. And, he hesitated, if what she says is true about your abilities, you'd fetch good coin for the right quests. Naruto nodded, recognizing an opportunity to gather information and resources. I'd appreciate directions. I'm new to this region. The older guard snorted. New to this world, more like, judging by your clothes and manner. But we see all types here. The guild's the large building in the town center with the crossed swords sign. Can't miss it. As they passed through the gates, Elaine squeezed Naruto's arm. My home is just past the marketplace. Come by later if you need an why thing. My father will want to thank you properly. Her eyes conveyed more gratitude than words could express. What you did, I won't forget it. After ensuring Elaine reunited safely with her tearful family, Naruto made his way through the bustling morning crowd toward the guild hall. The town offered a fascinating blend of familiar and foreign architectural styles reminiscent of feudal constructions he'd seen in the Land of Iron. Yet with technological elements that seemed both more advanced and more primitive than his world. The guild hall loomed ahead, a 2-story wooden structure with stone foundations and multiple chimneys releasing smoke into the crisp morning air. Inside, adventurers of various descriptions clustered around a bulletin board or occupied tables with maps and drinks. The atmosphere reminded Naruto of Konoha's mission assignment room, though considerably rowdier. He approached the counter where a harried-looking woman with spectacles managed a ledger. New registration, she asked without looking up, dipping her quill in ink. Yes, Naruto replied, though I have some questions about how things work here. She glanced up, her professional assessment tacky. In his unusual attire and foreign features. Foreign ranger type, EH. We get your sort occasionally. Basic fee is 5 copper for registration, plus verification of at least 1 skill. References P. Referred but not required for porcelain rank. Naruto blinked at the unfamiliar terminology. I don't have local currency yet. As for skills, he paused, considering how to present himself. I'm proficient in hand-to-hand combat, stealth operations, and various energy manipulation techniques. The woman sighed, setting down her quill. Another one with grand claims. Look, we have procedures. No coin, no registration. No registration, no quests. No quests, no coin. See the problem. As for verification, you'll need to demonstrate basic competence to one of our evaluators. Perhaps I can help with that, came a deep voice from behind. Naruto turned to find a tall, heavily armored man regarding him with interest. A platinum tag hung from his neck, marking him as someone of significance. Guild Master, the receptionist acknowledged, straightening. This foreigner wishes to register but lacks both currency and verifiable credentials. The Guild Master stroked his gray-streaked beard. I overheard mention of the temple ruins. We've lost good people investigating those cultists. If you truly faced them and returned, that's verification enough for preliminary ranking. He extended a weathered hand. Darius Ironheart, I manage this frontier outpost and evaluate unusual cases personally. Naruto clasped his hand. Naruto Uzumaki. Unusual name. Unusual appearance. Darius gestured toward a private office. Let's discuss your experience in detail. If your account proves satisfactory, I'll waive the registration fee as recompense for information. The office reflected its occupant. Practical, well organized. With maps covering one wall and weapons displayed on another. Darius settled behind a desk cluttered with reports and indicated for Naruto to sit. Now, he said, pouring 2 mugs of steaming liquid from a pot, tell me exactly what you encountered at those ruins. Spare no detail, however strange. Naruto accepted the drink, a bitter herbal tea unlike any he'd tasted, and recounted his experience. Carefully editing certain aspects of his dimensional arrival while remaining truthful about the cult's activities and the evidence his clone had gathered. He described the ritual configuration, the references to the Whisper King, and the unusual energy signatures he'd sensed. Darius listened with increasing interest, occasionally making notes on parchment. And you subdued 13 cultists alone, he stated rather than asked when Naruto finished. How? Rather than explain, Naruto demonstrated. A shadow clone appeared beside him, bowed to the startled guild master, then dispelled itself. Darius's mug halted halfway to his lips. Extraordinary. I've seen illusionists create visual duplicates, but never physical copies capable of independent action. He set down his drink. What else can you do? Naruto held out his hand, gathering chakra until a spiraling sphere of energy formed above his palm. A basic Rasengan, controlled and contained. Energy manipulation without incantation or catalyst, Darius murmured. And your combat capabilities? I was a soldier and special operative in my homeland, Naruto replied truthfully. Trained since childhood in various martial disciplines. Darius leaned back, assessing him with new respect. Your homeland must be far indeed. I've traveled extensively, yet I've never encountered techniques like yours. He reached into a desk drawer and withdrew a silver tag on a chain. Based on demonstrated abilities alone, you qualify for silver rank at minimum. However, our protocols require progressive advancement through quests and proven achievements. He placed a porcelain tag beside the silver one. Ordinarily, I'd start you at the bottom, but given the intelligence you've provided about a significant threat, I'm authorized to offer provisional steel rank. Complete 3 successful quests, and we'll reassess for potential advancement. Naruto accepted the steel-colored tag, recognizing it as this world's equivalent of mission rankings. The tag grants access to steel-ranked quests on the board and corresponding accommodations at affiliated inns, Darius explained. Guild takes 10% of quest rewards for administration and support services. Questions? Several, Naruto admitted. I need to understand this world better, its threats, politics, magic systems. And I need to determine if there's a way for me to return to my homeland. Something flickered in Darius's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or confirmation of a suspicion. You're not the first to arrive here from elsewhere, he said carefully. Though your method of arrival seems unique, there's someone you should meet who might provide insight regarding dimensional travel. He wrote something on a slip of parchment. Take this to the Temple of the Earth Mother in the capital when you're ready. It requests an audience with their high priestess on my authority. Naruto pocketed the note. Thank you. In the meantime, I'll need lodging and supplies. Darius nodded. The Silver Sword Inn provides credit to registered adventurers for their first week. As for equipment, he assessed Naruto's unusual clothing. Our armorsmith can provide more suitable attire for this realm, though I suspect you'll want to retain elements of your homeland's style. As they concluded their meeting, Darius offered one last piece of advice. This frontier attracts those seeking fresh starts, so few will question your origins too deeply. But your abilities will draw attention, both wanted and unwanted. Consider carefully when and how you display them. The silver sword inn proved modest but clean, its common room populated with adventurers trading stories over meals and drinks. Naruto secured a small private room through the guild's arrangement, then spent the remainder of the day acclimating to his new environment. He explored the town methodically, creating and dispelling shadow clones to cover more ground while remaining inconspicuous. Each clone's experiences returned to him upon dispelling, rapidly building his mental map of the settlement and its dynamics. The town reflected a pre-industrial society with magical elements interwoven into daily life. Enchanted lanterns provided consistent lighting in wealthier establishments. Healers used potions and incantations for medical treatment. Blacksmiths incorporated magical enhancements into weapons and armor. Most intriguing was the adventurer culture itself, a formalized system for handling threats ranging from monster extermination to escort missions. All categorized by difficulty and required expertise. The ranks progressed from porcelain through obsidian, steel, sapphire, emerald, ruby, bronze, silver, gold, and finally platinum, each indicated by the color of the tag worn by the adventurer. By evening, Naruto had established a basic understanding of local currency, common threats, and social hierarchies. He'd also visited the town's equipment shops, exchanging information about the cultists for credit toward more appropriate attire. The leatherworker had been particularly accommodating, creating a hybrid design that incorporated elements of Naruto's shinobi gear with local materials and styles. He returned to the inn as darkness fell, settling at a corner table with a plate of unfamiliar but savory stew. Two adventurers at the neighboring table glanced over repeatedly before one gathered the courage to approach. "New in town?" asked the man, a muscular individual with a steel tag matching Naruto's provisional rank. "Couldn't help noticing your gear earlier. Name's Garrett. This is my partner Lena." The woman nodded in greeting, her observant eyes suggesting greater perception than her companion. "Naruto," he replied with a friendly smile. "Just registered today." "Thought so," Garrett said, pulling up a chair uninvited. "Mind some company. Always good to know who's working the same territory." Naruto gestured welcome, recognizing an opportunity to gather more information. "I'm still learning how things work here." Lena joined them, setting down 3 mugs of ale. "Heard from the guild clerk you took down cultists at the old temple." "That true." Quote, "Word travels fast," Naruto observed, accepting the drink though he had no intention of consuming much. His enhanced metabolism processed alcohol quickly, but he preferred maintaining clear senses. "Small town," Garrett shrugged. "Especially when a foreigner jumps straight to steel rank without working up from porcelain. Some aren't happy about it." "I imagine not," Naruto acknowledged. "I'd feel the same if a stranger arrived in my homeland with special treatment." His candid response seemed to ease their suspicion somewhat. "Where exactly is this homeland?" Lena asked, sipping her ale. "Your accent and features don't match any region I've encountered, and I've traveled the eastern provinces extensively." Naruto considered his response carefully. "It's called the Land of Fire. Part of the elemental nations. Very distant from here." "True enough, if dimensionally distant counted." "Never heard of it," Garrett admitted. "But then, the world's larger than most realize. What brings you to our humble frontier?" "Circumstances beyond my control," Naruto replied with a rueful smile. "Now I'm seeking information about returning home while supporting myself through guild work." Their conversation continued, Naruto skillfully deflecting personal questions while extracting valuable context about recent events. He learned of increasing monster activities in the region, political tensions between frontier settlements and the capital, and rumors of strange occurrences similar to the ritual he'd interrupted. And then this farmer claims his entire flock vanished overnight. Garrett was saying, deep into his third ale while Naruto had barely touched his first. "No tracks, no blood, just gone. Guild sent ruby-ranked spell sword to investigate but found nothing conclusive." "Probably wolves," Lena countered. "Or that chimera that's been sighted in the northern ridges." "Wolves leave evidence," Garrett argued. "This was something else. Just like those disappearances from the eastern villages last month." The conversation shifted to war stories, with Garrett recounting increasingly embellished tales of his adventures. Naruto listened attentively, gleaning useful insights about common threats and effective tactics in this world. Enough about us, Lina said eventually, fixing Naruto with a shrewd gaze. Guild Master doesn't hand out steel rank for nothing. What's your specialty? Before Naruto could formulate a suitably vague response, commotion erupted at the inn's entrance. A blood-spattered messenger staggered through the door, his armor bearing the insignia of a nearby outpost. Goblin horde, he gasped, collapsing into the arms of nearest patron. Eastern farmsteads, under attack, hundreds of them with organized leadership. The inn erupted in activity as adventurers grabbed weapons and armor. Darius burst through the door moments later, his commanding presence bringing immediate focus to the chaos. Steel ranks and above, assemble outside for assignment, he ordered. Porcelain and obsidian, remain in town for defensive positions. Healers to the guild hall for supply distribution. As adventurers scrambled to comply, Darius caught Naruto's eye across the room. Time to prove that rank, newcomer. The eastern horizon glowed with unnatural light, farmhouses and fields ablaze against the night sky. Naruto ran alongside 24 adventurers, their formation spreading out as they approached the affected area. Scouts reported back with grim assessments, multiple goblin warbands coordinating with unusual strategic precision, targeting grain storage and livestock with methodical efficiency while taking human captives rather than killing them outright. Not normal goblin behavior, muttered Lina, who had been assigned to Naruto's 3-person team alongside a taciturn archer named Riven. They typically raid, kill, and retreat. This is systematic. Riven nodded grimly. Someone's directing them. Hobgoblin shaman, maybe, or something worse. Their team had been tasked with rescuing survivors from the southernmost farmstead while larger groups engaged the main horde. As they approached the burning homestead, Naruto extended his senses, a technique enhanced by the natural energy of this world. 12 goblins inside the main house, he reported with certainty. 4 human signatures, 3 adults, 1 child. Weakening life signs from 2 of them. Lina and Riven exchanged startled glances. How could you possibly know that? Riven demanded, fingering his bowstring nervously. Sensor ability. Naruto replied simply, I can detect living presences and distinguish between different types. Convenient skill, Lina acknowledged, unsheathing twin short swords. What's your tactical assessment? Naruto appreciated her practical acceptance. The humans are gathered in what feels like a root cellar or storage space beneath the house. Goblins are searching methodically. We have minutes at most before they locate the hiding spot. Frontal assault would alert them and endanger the hostages, Riven observed, notching an arrow. We need a distraction. Naruto smiled. Distraction happens to be a specialty of mine. He formed a familiar hand sign, and 3 shadow clones materialized beside him. Without waiting for his companions to overcome their shock, he outlined his plan. My clones will approach from the north, making enough noise to draw attention. When the goblins investigate, Riven provides covering fire from that elevated position while Lina and I enter through the south window. Priority is reaching the civilians before the goblins realize they're being flanked. Lina recovered quickly. Solid plan. Let's move. The operation unfolded with precision. Naruto's clones created a convincing diversion, yelling and crashing through the farm's equipment shed. As predicted, most goblins rushed toward the commotion, leaving only 3 guarding the house's interior. Naruto and Lina slipped through a broken window, dispatching the remaining guards with silent efficiency. They located the trapdoor to the root cellar moments later, lifting it to reveal a terrified family huddled among preserved vegetables and tools. Guild adventurers, Lina announced softly. We're here to evacuate you. The father cradled his unconscious wife, while the teenage son supported an elderly man with a bloody head wound. A young girl of perhaps 6 years clung to her brother, eyes wide with terror. My wife, the farmer gasped, she fought them when they broke in. Took a club to the head. Naruto knelt beside the woman, assessing her injury with gentle fingers. Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath his touch, and internal bleeding threatened her survival without immediate intervention. I can stabilize her, he said, making a quick decision. But we need to move fast. Before anyone could question him, Naruto placed both hands over the woman's injury. Channeling chakra with careful control, he implemented a basic medical ninjutsu technique Sakura had insisted he learn during the war. Not enough for complex healing, but sufficient to reduce swelling and slow bleeding. The woman's breathing steadied as soft green energy illuminated Naruto's hands. What manner of healing magic? The farmer whispered. Questions later, Lena interrupted. Her tone professional despite the obvious wonder in her eyes. Goblins will return once they realize they've been tricked. As if summoned by her words, shouts and crashes from outside indicated the clones had been discovered. Riven's bowstring sang as he provided covering fire from his position, but they had minutes at most before being overwhelmed. I'll create more clones to escort you to the perimeter, Naruto decided. Forming the necessary hand sign, Lena and I will cover your retreat. 5 shadow clones appeared, 2 immediately moving to carry the injured adults while the others secured the perimeter. The farmer stared in astonishment. Trust them as you would me, Naruto assured him. They'll protect you with their lives. As the evacuation began, Naruto and Lena won themselves at the farmhouse entrance. Outside, the sounds of battle intensified as Riven's arrows found their marks among the returning goblins. Your abilities, Lena said quietly as they prepared to engage. They're not like any magic I've encountered. Where I come from, we call it chakra manipulation, Naruto replied, summoning a Rasengan to his palm. Everyone has different specialties. And yours? Naruto smiled as the first wave of goblins charged the doorway. I'm rather unpredictable. What followed demonstrated the truth of his statement. Naruto fought with a blend of taijutsu, ninjutsu, and tactical shadow clone deployment that left even the experienced Lena struggling to follow his movements. He maintained awareness of his companion's position at all times, NTING her dual-blade fighting style by herding enemies into her strike zone or clearing space when she needed room to maneuver. As they pushed outward from the farmhouse, creating a defensive perimeter for the escaping family, Naruto gradually revealed more of his capabilities, wind nature chakra extending the cutting range of his kunai, strategically placed clones transforming into environmental objects to ambush attackers, and precise Rasengan variants that disabled multiple opponents without causing collateral damage to the already burning structures. The battle culminated when a massive HOB goblin, nearly twice the size of its lesser kin, emerged from the tree line, bellowing commands that immediately organized the scattered goblins into flanking formations. That's our leader, Lena panted, blood streaming from a shallow cut on her forehead. Take him down, and the horde might break. Naruto assessed the hobgoblin's equipment, crude but effective armor, a massive spiked club, and had appeared to be primitive explosion tags hanging from its belt. More concerning was the unusual dark energy that seemed to pulse around it, visible only to Naruto's sage-enhanced perception. Cover me, he said, forming a familiar cross-shaped hand sign. This ends now. Multiple shadow clones burst into existence, charging the hobgoblin from different directions. As the creature fought with surprising skill, Naruto circled behind it, gathering natural energy into his system. The familiar sensation of sage mode washed over him, enhancing his perceptions and physical capabilities. When he opened his eyes, orange pigmentation surrounded them, and his irises had transformed to a golden hue with horizontal bar-like pupils. The change didn't go unnoticed. By the Earth Mother, Riven gasped from his position, lowering his bow momentarily. His eyes. The hobgoblin sensed the surge in power, turning to face this new threat with unexpected intelligence in its gaze. It barked commands in the guttural goblin language, and the smaller creatures formed a protective ring around their leader. Naruto moved with sage-enhanced speed, crossing the distance faster than normal vision could track. The hobgoblin's club whistled through empty air as Naruto appeared within its guard, a Rasengan forming in his palm. Whatever's controlling you, Naruto said, meeting the creature's suddenly fearful eyes, it ends here. The Rasengan connected with the hobgoblin's chest, grinding through armor and flesh before launching the massive creature backward through several trees. As it fell, dark energy Naruto had detected seemed to writhe and dissipate like smoke in wind. The effect on the goblin horde was immediate and dramatic. Without their leader's directing influence, their coordinated tactics collapsed into confused individual actions. Some fled immediately, while others continued fighting with diminished effectiveness, easily dispatched by the adventurers who had witnessed. Naruto's display with expressions ranging from awe to suspicion. As Sage Mode faded, Naruto rejoined Lina and Riven, noting their guarded postures. That was, Lina began, searching for words. Gold rank magic, at minimum. Riven finished, his expression unreadable. Those eyes. The markings patterns. I've only heard stories of such things. Naruto shrugged, downplaying his abilities. Where I come from, it's called Sage Mode. It temporarily enhances physical capabilities by harmonizing with natural energy. The goblins are retreating on all fronts, reported another adventurer, approaching with obvious caution. Guild Master requests all teams report to the command point for assessment. As they walked, Lina kept pace beside Naruto. You're not what you appear to be, she said quietly. That provisional steel rank is a severe underestimation. I'm just someone trying to find my way home, Naruto replied truthfully. The rank doesn't matter to me. It will to others, she warned. Power like yours attracts attention, both reverence and fear. Be prepared for how people will react once word spreads. Word spread with remarkable speed. By the time the adventuring RTIES returned to Frontier Town the following morning, tales of the golden-eyed foreigner had already reached the populace. Naruto's attempts to downplay his actions proved futile as multiple witnesses recounted his battle with the hobgoblin, each version more embellished than the last. Darius summoned him to the guild hall immediately upon return, his expression grave as Naruto entered his office. Sit, the guild master instructed, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. We need to discuss what happened yesterday. Naruto complied, noting the additional presence of an elderly man in elaborate robes standing by the window. This is Magister Thorn from the Arcane College in the capital, Darius introduced. He happened to be visiting our branch when reports came in about your abilities. The Magister studied Naruto with unabashed interest. Fascinating. The energy signature is unlike anything in our taxonomic classifications. He approached, hands raised. May I, Yuto remained still as the old man passed trembling hands near his body without touching, murmuring incantations that caused his fingertips to glow with soft blue light. Extraordinary, Thorn whispered. The energy circulates through dedicated channels, yet interacts with ambient forces in a harmonized pattern. Neither divine nor elemental in traditional categories. He stepped back, eyes bright with academic excitement. Young man, your internal energy system represents an entirely novel magical paradigm. Darius cleared his throat. While the theoretical implications fascinate scholars, my concern is more practical. You displayed gold-ranked capabilities at minimum, possibly platinum. That creates complications. I understand, Naruto acknowledged. I didn't intend to disrupt your ranking system. It's not about the system, Darius replied, leaning forward. It's about balance of power and information control. Abilities like yours will draw attention from entities beyond this frontier. Some beneficial, others decidedly not. Magister Thorn nodded eagerly. The Arcane College would offer substantial compensation for the opportunity to document your techniques. The Royal Court always seeks exceptional talents for specialized roles. Various religious orders might view your abilities as manifestations of divine favor or heretical power. And less savory organizations will target you for exploitation or elimination, Darius added bluntly. Which brings me to our immediate concern, how to classify and present you within the guild structure. Naruto considered this. His shinobi training had always emphasized concealing capabilities unless necessary, but this world operated differently. Registration and transparency seemed built into the social framework. What do you recommend? He asked. Darius exchanged glances with the Magister. Officially registering you at your demonstrated capability would create political complications requiring capital approval. However, maintaining your provisional steel rank after public display of gold-level abilities would undermine guild credibility. There is precedent for special designation, Thorn suggested. Similar to how we classify unique magical practitioners who don't fit standard adventurer categories. Darius nodded slowly. A specialized rank acknowledgement without full privileges until formal assessment from capital representatives. He reached into a drawer and withdrew a tag unlike the standard metal ones. This one appeared crafted from actual gold with intricate engraving around its edge. T.S. designates you as gold ranked. Provisional assessment required, he explained, sliding it across the desk. It acknowledges your demonstrated capabilities while indicating formal evaluation is pending. It grants access to high-rank facilities and appropriate quest consideration without immediately integrating you into the political hierarchy that accompanies full gold status. Naruto accepted the tag, recognizing the careful compromise it represented. There's more, Darius continued. Your performance against the Goblin Horde has accelerated the timeline for your introduction to certain parties. That letter I gave you for the Temple of the Earth Mother. I've received word they're sending a representative here instead. Apparently, news of a golden-eyed sage triggered significant interest. What kind of interest? Naruto asked cautiously. Religious, primarily, Thorn interjected. The Earth Mother's priesthood maintains extensive records of prophetic text and dimensional phenomena. If anyone can provide insight regarding your arrival and possible return home, their archives would contain it. Their representative arrives tomorrow, Darius added. Until then, I suggest maintaining a low profile. Despite our frontier location, we host visitors from throughout the kingdom, including those with connections to organizations that might take unhealthy interest in your abilities. As the meeting concluded, Magister Thorn could barely contain his academic excitement. If you would consider demonstrating some basic techniques under controlled observation, young man, He College would compensate you handsomely. Purely for academic documentation, of course. Perhaps another time, Naruto replied diplomatically. My priority remains finding a way home. Darius accompanied him to the door. The Silver Sword's private dining room is available for your use tonight, he said quietly. Less exposure to curious onlookers. I've also arranged more suitable accommodations befitting your new designation. Naruto nodded gratefully. Thank you for your consideration, but I'm comfortable with simple quarters. A faint smile touched Darius's weathered face. Humility is admirable, but in this realm, appearances and station matter. The gold suite at the Silver Sword includes security features appropriate for someone of your capabilities, and the attention you'll inevitably attract. The gold suite proved to be a spacious apartment occupying the inn's entire top floor, complete with private bathing facilities, enchanted locks, and furnishings that balanced luxury with functionality. Naruto spent the afternoon acclimating to his new accommodations while sending shadow clones in disguise to continue mapping the town and gathering information. The clone's reports confirmed Darius's warning about attention. Throughout the settlement, conversations centered on the Golden Sage, who had single-handedly turned the tide against the Goblin Horde. Some accounts approached religious reverence, describing golden light and miraculous healing. Others carried darker undertones of suspicion and fear regarding unknown magic. Naruto absorbed this information thoughtfully while preparing for his meeting with the temple representative. If this world's religious authorities maintained knowledge about dimensional travel, they represented his best hope for returning home, or at least understanding why he had been brought here. As evening approached, he bathed and changed into the new attire he'd commissioned, leather armor reinforced with chainmail at vital points. Styled to allow maximum mobility while incorporating elements reminiscent of his shinobi gear. The outfit maintained his signature orange and black color scheme, though subdued to better blend with this world's fashion sensibilities. The private dining room Darius had arranged featured a single large table with comfortable seating and a small hearth providing warmth and soft lighting. Naruto arrived early, taking position with clear sightlines to both door and windows, a shinobi habit too ingrained to break even in supposedly secure settings. The server had just finished arranging a meal of roasted game, fresh bread, and local vegetables when a quiet knock announced his visitor's arrival. Enter, Naruto called, rising from his seat. The door opened to admit a figure that momentarily stole Naruto's practiced composure. She stood tall and regal in flowing vestments of pale gold and white, adorned with symbols Naruto didn't recognize. A veil of shimmering material covered her eyes. Yet she moved with absolute certainty, suggesting the covering served symbolic rather than practical purpose. Her hair, silver blonde and elaborately braided, framed features of striking bow tie despite the scars visible on her throat and jawline. Most compelling was her presence, an aura of dignified strength tempered by something Naruto immediately recognized, the unmistakable residue of profound trauma carefully contained beneath layers of hard-won composure. Naruto Uzumaki, she spoke, her voice melodious yet carrying steel beneath its gentle tones. "I am Sword Maiden, High Prize. Tess of the Temple of the Earth Mother and former gold-ranked adventurer." Naruto bowed respectfully, recognizing both her official status and the warrior's spirit beneath the religious title. "I'm honored by your presence, High Priestess. I didn't expect someone of your station to travel personally." A small smile curved her lips. "When reports reach the temple of a golden-eyed sage appearing from nowhere to battle darkness with techniques unknown to our world, certain prophecies demand attention." She tilted her head slightly. "Particularly when that sage bears a spiritual energy signature unlike any in our records." She moved forward with perfect grace despite her covered eyes, taking the seat Naruto offered. As they settled across from each other, Naruto noticed how her hands, elegant yet bearing the subtle calluses of someone intimately familiar with weapons, briefly trembled before she clasped them together. "You've come about the letter Guild Master Darius prepared," Naruto began. "Regarding my situation and possible return to my homeland." Sword Maiden nodded. "The letter merely confirmed what our seers had already glimpsed, a dimensional breach unlike typical summoning magic. Depositing a warrior with extraordinary abilities directly into a dark ritual site." Her head tilted again, as though studying him through her veil. "But the seers couldn't penetrate the golden light surrounding you to determine your origins or purpose." "I have no purpose beyond finding my way home," Naruto replied honestly. "My arrival here was accidental, the result of a battle in my world that apparently weakened dimensional boundaries." "There are no accidents in matters of dimensional transit," she said with quiet certainty. "The barriers between worlds resist breach except through immense power or divine intervention. For you to arrive precisely at the moment cultists attempted to summon an entity from beyond suggests purpose rather than chance." Naruto considered this. His shinobi training had taught him to question coincidences, yet he hesitated to accept some divine plan behind his dimensional displacement. "You mentioned prophecies," he said carefully. "What exactly do they say about golden-eyed sages?" Sword Maiden's expression remained composed, but something in her posture suggested internal conflict, as though weighing how much to reveal. "The temple archives contain references to the golden sage who walks between worlds, whose eyes reflect the harmony of natural forces, and whose coming heralds both calamity and salvation." She recited the words with practiced precision. Such texts are typically regarded as allegorical rather than literal prophetic vision. "Until someone matching the description appears," Naruto observed. "Precisely." Her fingers traced patterns on the table's surface, unconscious movements suggesting deeper thought. "The timing is particularly significant. Recent months have seen increasing disturbances in the natural order, unusual monster behavior. Ritual sites similar to where you appeared, reports of strange phenomena at ancient ruins. Like the hobgoblin I fought," Naruto noted. "It was being influenced by some external force, a dark energy signature unlike anything natural to the creature." This information caused Sword Maiden to still completely. "You could perceive the corruption directly." "In sage mode, yes. It appeared as a dark energy clinging to the creature, directing its actions while suppressing its normal behavior patterns." The priestess leaned forward, her intensity palpable despite her covered eyes. "This confirms our worst fears. Something is attempting to establish control over creatures across the realm, not through conventional magic but through direct corruption of life essence." Naruto recognized the implications immediately. "Similar to how Kagaya used the infinite Tsukuyomi," he murmured, mostly to himself. "Kagaya?" Sword Maiden questioned. "A goddess-like entity from my world who attempted to control all living beings through manipulation of their life energy," Naruto explained, realizing the parallel. "We stopped her, but the dimensional aftermath may have weakened the barriers between worlds." Sword Maiden absorbed this information with remarkable composure. "Then perhaps your arrival was indeed purposeful, not as invader or victim, but as one who has already faced similar darkness." Their conversation continued through the meal, exchanging information with increasing openness as mutual respect developed. Naruto described his world's chakra system and fourth-grade ninja war without revealing specific village secrets, while Sword Maiden provided context about this realm's magical traditions, political structures, and growing threats. "The temple would welcome you as an honored guest for further consultation," she offered eventually. Our archives contain additional references that might illuminate your situation, and our seers could attempt more focused divination regarding potential return passages. Naruto sensed the genuine offer beneath her formal invitation. I'd be grateful for any assistance the temple can provide. However, he paused, considering his next words carefully. I sense there's more to your interest than official temple business. A subtle tension appeared in her posture, barely perceptible, but significant to Naruto's trained observation. You perceive clearly, she acknowledged after a moment. The temple's interest is genuine, but my personal presence rather than sending an emissary reflects additional concerns. Her hands clasped tighter. Reports of your healing abilities particularly caught my attention. Witnesses described regenerative magic unlike conventional healing spells. It's a basic medical technique from my world. Naruto confirmed. Not my specialty, but useful for emergency stabilization. Hope flickered across her features before being carefully contained. The temple would compensate handsomely for demonstration of such techniques. For academic documentation, of course. Naruto recognized the echo of Magister Thorn's request, but with entirely different motivation behind it. There was something deeply personal in her careful phrasing. High Priestess, he said gently, if you're seeking healing for yourself, you can simply ask directly. The composed mask slipped momentarily, revealing vulnerable surprise before she recovered. You are unusually perceptive for a warrior. I've spent my life learning to see beneath masks and understand the pain people carry, Naruto replied simply. Your title is Sword Maiden, yet you no longer carry a blade. Your veiled eyes don't prevent you from navigating perfectly. There's history there, and if my abilities might help, I'm willing to try. She remained silent for several heartbeats. When she spoke, her voice carried a depth of emotion carefully controlled through obvious practice. 10 years ago, I was captured during a mission gone wrong. Goblins held me for days before my party found me. Her hands remained clasped tightly enough that knuckles whitened. The physical wounds healed, mostly. But they took my eyes. And no magic has restored that loss. More significantly, the experience left other scars. Ones that resist conventional healing. The weight of her words hung in the air between them. Naruto understood immediately. The trauma response he'd sensed in her bearing, the careful control, the hope barely contained beneath professional inquiry. I can't promise miracles, he said honestly. My world's medical ninjutsu can heal physical damage, sometimes even regenerate tissue, but psychological trauma requires different approaches. Yet you yourself carry deep wounds that you've overcome. She observed with unexpected insight. Your eyes hold the same knowledge as mine, understanding of darkness that others cannot comprehend. Naruto nodded slowly. My childhood was difficult. And I've witnessed war, loss, betrayal. But I also found people who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. He thought of Iruka, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and countless others who had shaped his path. Healing comes through connection more than any technique. A wisdom many healers never grasp, Sword Maiden said softly. As for your eyes, Naruto continued, I would need to examine the Dhamma GE to determine if my techniques might help. Physical regeneration depends on how long ago the injury occurred and what healing methods have already been attempted. Hope and hesitation warred visibly in her expression. You would attempt this, for a stranger from a world not your own. Naruto smiled. Helping others isn't conditional on where they're from. If I have the ability to ease suffering, I consider it my responsibility to try. Something in his words seemed to resonate deeply with her. The careful diplomatic facade she had maintained throughout their conversation softened, revealing more of the person beneath the title. The temple guest quarters are prepared for your arrival whenever you choose to visit the capital, she said. However, I have 2 days of official business here before returning. Perhaps, we might discuss possibilities further during that time. I'd welcome the opportunity, Naruto replied sincerely. As they concluded their meeting and Sword Maiden prepared to depart, she paused at the doorway, turning back with an expression of careful consideration. There is one more thing, she said. A personal request rather than temple business. Yes, the guild has registered reports of unusual activity at an abandoned temple 3 days' journey north, similar energy signatures to what you described corrupting the hobgoblin. No formal quest has been posted due to insufficient information, but, she hesitated. I would value your perspective on whether it connects to these dimensional disturbances. Naruto understood immediately. Your investigating these occurrences independently of your official temple duties. A small smile touched her lips. Let us say the temple's bureaucratic response moves more slowly than emerging threats sometimes warrant. My history as an adventurer occasionally proves useful for preliminary assessment. When would you want to leave? Naruto asked, already anticipating her answer. Tomorrow at dawn, she replied without hesitation. The journey requires traversing difficult terrain, and I've arranged for a small, discreet party with local knowledge. Naruto nodded. I'll be ready, though I should warn you, my experiences with temples in this world haven't been entirely positive so far. Her smile widened slightly, revealing a glimpse of the warrior beneath the priestess. Nor have mine, gold-ranked sage. Perhaps together we'll improve that record. As she departed, Naruto contemplated the unexpected developments of his brief time in this world. From accidental arrival to provisional gold rank, from goblin battles to prophetic implications, and now, partnership with a traumatized priestess warrior with her own hidden agenda. If returning home proved impossible in the immediate future, at least his path here promised to be anything but boring. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, Echoes of Trauma. Dawn painted the eastern sky in watercolor hues as Naruto secured the last of his equipment. The EU attire he'd commissioned felt strange yet familiar, leather armor reinforced at strategic points, styled to allow the mobility his fighting techniques required while incorporating elements that would help him blend into this world. He'd retained touches of orange in the trim, a small concession to his identity amidst so much change. The innkeeper had provided a substantial breakfast before most guests had stirred, cold meats, fresh bread, and a bitter stimulant beverage that locals favored before long journeys. Naruto consumed it efficiently, his mind focused on the expedition ahead. 3 days north to an abandoned temple. Possible connections to dimensional disturbances. A priestess with hidden motives and visible scars. The scenario demanded both combat readiness and diplomatic sensitivity. As he descended to the inn's courtyard, Naruto found a small party already assembled. 4 horses stood saddled and provisioned, attended by a weathered man whose leathery skin and watchful eyes marked him as an experienced guide. Beside him stood a younger man with the build and alert posture of trained security, a mercenary or off-duty adventurer, Naruto guessed. And then there was Sword Maiden. She had exchanged her formal religious vestments for practical traveling attire, fitted leather armor beneath a hooded cloak of muted green. The veil across her eyes remained, though now it appeared thinner. More functional than ceremonial, her silver blonde hair had been braided and coiled at the nape of her neck, a warrior's practical style rather than the elaborate arrangement from their previous meeting. Most striking was the staff she carried, not the ornate religious symbol he might have expected, but a combat-ready weapon of polished wood with metal-reinforced ends and subtle runes carved along its length. It confirmed what Naruto had sensed. Beneath the High Priestess title remained the reflexes and mindset of a gold-ranked adventurer. "Good morning, Naruto Uzumaki," she greeted, her voice carrying the same formal tone as their first meeting, though pitched for privacy rather than ceremonial effect. "I trust you slept well." "Well enough," he replied with a smile. Huff, I admit I'm more accustomed to traveling on foot than horseback. These northern trails would challenge even experienced hikers," she explained. "Kel has selected mounts with temperaments suited to difficult terrain." She gestured toward the older man, who acknowledged Naruto with a respectful nod. "Been guiding these mountains 30 years, Kel said, his voice gravelly from years of weather exposure. "Heard what you did against them goblins. Good to have someone with real fighting experience along." He glanced meaningfully at Sword Maiden. "No disrespect to your position, milady." "None taken," she replied with the faintest smile. "My adventuring days may lie behind me, but I haven't forgotten everything." The younger man approached, extending a hand toward Naruto. "Dorn," he introduced himself simply. "Emerald rank. Guild master assigned me as security escort." Naruto clasped his hand, noting the calluses and precise grip strength. "A swordsman, primarily, with secondary weapon training." "Pleasure to meet you. Have you worked with the High Priestess before?" "First time," Dorn replied, though her reputation precedes her. Something in his tone suggested complex feelings about that reputation. But Naruto detected no outright hostility, merely the caution of someone who had survived by maintaining professional boundaries. We should depart, Sword Maiden suggested, moving toward the chestnut mare that clearly belonged to her from the way the animal responded to her approach. The northern pass is best traversed before afternoon winds strengthen. As Naruto mounted his own horse, a sturdy black gelding with surprising patience for a novice rider, he noticed Kel watching him with professional assessment. "Not much horse experience where you're from?" the guide asked. "We tend toward foot travel," Naruto confirmed. "Though I'm a quick learner." "Stay relaxed but balanced," Kel advised. "This one's called Shadow. Steady temperament, good instincts. Trust him to handle the terrain and he'll trust you to make the decisions." The small party departed through the town's northern gate as morning activity began stirring the settlement. Few residents ticked their passage, a deliberate choice of timing, Naruto suspected, to minimize attention. Whatever Sword Maiden's official explanation for this expedition, she clearly preferred discretion. As they left civilization behind, the landscape transformed from cultivated fields to wild foothills. Towering pines created natural corridors between rocky outcroppings, while distant peaks loomed ahead, their summits obscured by thin clouds. The air carried the sharp scent of resin and wild herbs, cleaner than anything Naruto had experienced since his arrival in this world. Kel led them along game trails and ancient pathways with the confidence of someone who had memorized every fold in the landscape. Dorn maintained vigilant watch, hand never straying far from his sword hilt. Sword Maiden rode with perfect posture and surprising grace for someone with covered eyes, her other senses clearly compensating with heightened acuity. For the first hour, conversation remained minimal and practical, warnings about difficult passages. Brief explanations of landmarks, occasional adjustments to their formation when terrain required single-file progress. As they crossed a swift-running stream via natural stone steps, Kel finally broke the focused silence. 2 hours to the old watchtower, he announced. Good place for midday rest. After that, we leave the marked trails. He glanced back at Sword Maiden. Still want to take the high pass rather than the trade route? Yes, she confirmed. Our destination requires discretion. Naruto used the conversation opening to satisfy his curiosity. This abandoned temple we're heading for, what's its history? The question created a subtle tension among his companions. Kel and Dorn exchanged glances, while Sword Maiden's expression remained unreadable behind her veil. It predates current settlement patterns, she answered after a measured pause. Originally dedicated to an aspect of the Earth Mother concerned with boundaries, between worlds, seasons, life and death. Such places were once common throughout the realm, particularly in remote regions where the fabric between dimensions grows thin. And now, Naruto pressed gently, most were converted to modern worship or abandoned when the unification occurred 4 centuries ago, she explained. This particular site was reportedly destroyed during the Mage rebellions 2 centuries later. Deemed heretical by the crown's religious authorities. Dorn snorted softly. That's the official version. Kel shot him a warning glance, but Sword Maiden nodded slightly. Dorn speaks truly. Local legends suggest the temple's destruction came after something emerged from its inner sanctum, something the official records deliberately obscure. Something like what appeared during the ritual that brought me here, Naruto suggested. Perhaps, she acknowledged, which explains my interest in your perspective. Few have experienced dimensional transit directly and retained coherent awareness afterward. Their conversation paused as the trail narrowed, forcing them to proceed single file along a ridge offering spectacular views of the valley below. Ancient pine forests stretched toward the horizon, interrupted occasionally by rocky clearings or the silver threads of narrow streams. In the far distance, thin columns of smoke marked isolated homesteads, the final outposts of civilization before true wilderness claimed the landscape. When they regrouped on wider ground, Naruto found himself riding alongside Sword Maiden while Kel and Dorn scouted slightly ahead. You mentioned your world's war during our discussion yesterday, she said, her voice pitched for privacy. Were dimensional breaches common in that conflict? Naruto considered how to explain concepts like the infinite Tsukuyomi and Kagaya's dimensional abilities without overwhelming someone without contextual knowledge. Not common, he answered carefully. But the final battle involved an entity with Th. Power to create and traverse dimensions. Defeating her required similar abilities from those fighting her. He flexed his right hand unconsciously, remembering the six paths power that had temporarily been granted to him. The aftermath may have destabilized boundaries between worlds. Fascinating, she murmured. Our records speak of the realm ways, passages between dimensions that occasion a LLY open during cosmic alignments or significant magical events. Traditionally, only spiritual entities could traverse them, not physical beings. Yet here I am, Naruto observed with a slight smile. Indeed, which suggests either the boundaries have weakened considerably, or your nature differs fundamentally from typical physical beings. She tilted her head slightly. The golden energy hour say, detected surrounding you, is that related to how you crossed between worlds? Naruto considered the question. Could Kurama's chakra have protected him during dimensional transit? Or was it his abilities harmonizing with this world's natural energy that had allowed his safe passage? Possibly, he acknowledged. Though I didn't intentionally travel here. It was more like being caught in a current between worlds. And now you seek to swim back against that current, she observed. If possible, Naruto confirmed. Though not at any cost. My world has achieved peace after long conflict. They'll manage without me while I find my path. Something in his words seemed to resonate with her. Her posture softened slightly, the formal distance she maintained yielding momentarily to genuine curiosity. You speak of your homeland with affection but not desperation, she noted. Many displaced by circumstance become consumed by their loss. Naruto smiled. A wise teacher once told me that life is about adaptation. The path changes, obstacles appear, but our responsibility is to keep moving forward. He thought of Jiraiya with a pang of fond remembrance. Besides, if I'm here for a reason, I should understand that reason before rushing to leave. A remarkably philosophical perspective for a warrior, Sword Maiden commented, surprise evident in her tone. Where I come from, the strongest warriors understand that physical power means nothing without purpose and wisdom to guide it, Naruto replied. I learned that lesson through difficult experience. Before she could respond, Dorn returned from his forward position, expression alert. Riders approaching from the north, he reported. 6, maybe 7, armed, moving with purpose. Kel frowned, consulting the map that decades of experience had etched into his memory. No patrols scheduled in this region. Merchants wouldn't take this route. Bandits. Possible, Dorn acknowledged. Though bandits typically avoid temple personnel. He glanced at Sword Maiden's distinctive appearance. Unless they're not local, Naruto suggested. Or they have specific reasons for intercepting this particular group. Something in his tone caused Sword Maiden to turn toward him. You suspect this isn't random. 4 people traveling a remote trail toward an abandoned temple site reportedly connected to dimensional anomalies. One day after I've been publicly identified as someone who traversed dimensions. Naruto shrugged. I don't believe in that many coincidences. Dorn's hand moved to his sword. Options. The ridge ahead offers limited cover but good visibility, Kel suggested. Could make defensive stand if needed. Or we could determine their intentions before assuming hostility, Sword Maiden countered. If they're simply travelers, confrontation serves no purpose. Naruto had already extended his senses, a technique enhanced by this world's unique natural energy patterns. 7 riders, as Dorn said. But there's something off about their chakra signatures. They feel muffled, like they're deliberately suppressing their presence. That observation decided the matter. Kel, find us defensive position. Sword Maiden instructed, her tone shifting subtly from diplomatic priestess to experienced tactician. Dorn, prepare for potential engagement but hold unless provoked. Naruto, can you provide reconnaissance without being detected? Naruto nodded, forming a familiar hand sign. A shadow clone materialized beside him, drawing startled looks from Kel and Dorn despite their professional composure. My clone will circle behind them, Naruto explained. It can gather intelligence and dispel itself to return information instantly. Without waiting for acknowledgement, the clone transformed its appearance to match the surrounding environment and departed with shinobi stealth. The original Naruto dismounted, patting Shadow's neck reassuringly. Horses will be liabilities if this turns into a fight, he observed. We should secure them somewhere sheltered. Kel nodded approval, thinking like a mountaineer already. There's a stand of pines ahead with adequate concealment. Horses can be recovered regardless of outcome. As they secured their mounts in the dense evergreen cover, Naruto felt his clone's experiences flood back as it dispelled itself. The incoming information confirmed his suspicions and added concerning details. 7 riders wearing mixed armor with no consistent insignia, he reported as they established position along the rocky ridge. Armed with crossbows and curved swords. They're traveling in standard search formation with paired scouts. Most significantly, they're carrying detection equipment, crystalline devices that pulse with energy. Scryers. Sword Maiden identified immediately. Magical tracking tools calibrated to specific energy signatures. They're hunting someone, Dorn concluded, unsheathing his sword with deliberate quiet. Or something, Naruto corrected. The devices aren't pointing ahead toward us. They're sweeping side to side, scanning the landscape systematically. Sword Maiden's expression tightened with concern. If they're tracking residual dimensional energy, then the temple site may not be abandoned after all, Naruto finished. And our expedition just became significantly more complicated. The approaching riders crested the nearest hill, their formation tightening as they entered the more confined trail. At this distance, details became clearer, mismatched equipment suggesting mercenary status rather than official affiliation, with only their leader wearing quality armor. Most notable were the crystal-tipped rods they carried, which emitted faint pulses of purplish light at irregular intervals. They haven't detected us yet, Naruto observed. Their equipment seems focused on a different signature type than living presence. We have 3 options, Sword Maiden stated calmly. Remain concealed and allow them to pass, approach openly and gauge their response, or prepare ambush to capture for interrogation. I vote ambush, Dorn said without hesitation. If they're tracking dimensional energy for nefarious purpose, they're likely connected to the cult activities you're investigating. Kel shook his head. Too risky. 7 against 4, with unknown capabilities. Better to observe their direction and follow at distance. Naruto considered the tactical situation with veteran assessment. I can even the numbers without revealing our position, he offered. Create clones to flank them. Then use substitution techniques to capture their leader for questioning while disorienting the others. Sword Maiden tilted her head, considering the suggestion. Minimal risk with maximum intelligence gain. She acknowledged. Proceed, but prioritize capture over confrontation. We need information more than victory. Naruto nodded, forming multiple hand signs in quick succession. 4 shadow clones materialized in concealed positions, each receiving silent instructions through their shared consciousness. The original Naruto prepared a substitution jutsu, identifying a loose rock near the enemy leader as his target marker. What followed demonstrated the effectiveness of shinobi tactics against unprepared opponents. As the riders entered the narrowest section of trail, Naruto's clones struck with synchronized precision. Smoke bombs created momentary confusion while flash tags disoriented their vision. In that crucial moment of disorder, Naruto executed his substitution, instantaneously exchanging positions with the rock he'd targeted. The enemy leader barely registered the displacement before Naruto's strike to precise pressure points rendered him unconscious. Simultaneously, the shadow clones disabled the nearest riders with targeted blows, creating a chaotic impression of attackers materializing from multiple directions. Ambush, shouted one mercenary, raising his crossbow only to have it kicked from his hands by a clone appearing directly before him. Within 30 seconds, 5 of the 7 riders lay unconscious or restrained, while the remaining 2 had retreated behind cover, firing crossbow bolts wildly at perceived threats. Naruto signaled his companions, who emerged from concealment to secure the incapacitated enemies. Dorn whistled low appreciation. 8 years in the Royal Corps, and I've never seen an ambush executed that cleanly. Priority target secured, Naruto reported, dragging the unconscious leader toward their position. The remaining 2 were pinned down by my clones but unharmed. Suggestions. Offer surrender, Sword Maiden decided. They may provide additional information voluntarily if they believe C.O. operation serves their interests better than resistance. Kel moved to secure the strange crystal devices, handling them with the caution of someone experienced with potentially dangerous magical items. These ain't standard scryers, he noted. Got unfamiliar runes etched around the base. Nothing registered with the Mage Guild, I'd wager. The conscious ones have stopped firing, Naruto observed. They're discussing options. From their gestures, I think they're considering surrender. Bring them in, Sword Maiden instructed. Dorn, prepare restraints. Kel, check their belongings for identification or additional equipment. Naruto, if you would ensure they're thoroughly disarmed. The efficiency of their response revealed much about Sword Maiden's leadership experience. Despite her current religious role, the tactical decisiveness of her former adventuring career remained evident in how she managed the developing situation. Within minutes, they had secured all 7 captives. The 5 unconscious ones bound and arranged under shelter, while the 2 who had surrendered knelt under Dorn's watchful guard. The leader, a scarred man with the bearing of a veteran mercenary, had regained consciousness and now glared at his captors with calculated assessment rather than fear. "You're making a serious mistake," he stated flatly. "We operate under special dispensation from the Royal Arcane Division. Interfering with our mission carries severe penalties." Sword Maiden approached, her posture deliberately imposing despite her blindfold. "Curious. The Royal Arcane Division ISSUES standardized credentials and equipment to all sanctioned field operations. You carry neither." The leader's expression flickered, a momentary break in his confident facade. "Specialized covert operation," he countered smoothly. "Documentation would compromise operational security." Naruto stepped forward, holding one of the crystal devices. "Then perhaps you can explain the purpose of these non-standard scryers. Particularly why they're calibrated to detect dimensional breach energy rather than conventional magical signatures." Another flicker of surprise crossed the man's features, not at the question itself, but at Naruto's specific technical knowledge of the equipment. "Who exactly are you people?" he demanded, reassessing the threat they represented. "I am Sword Maiden, High Priestess of the Earth Mother Temple." She introduced herself formally. "These are my authorized escorts investigating reports of dimensional disturbances under temple jurisdiction. Now, I suggest considering your approach to this conversation." The revelation of her identity had visible impact. The leader's posture stiffened, while the 2 conscious subordinates exchanged alarmed glances. "High Priestess," the leader acknowledged, his tone markedly more respectful. "There appears to be a jurisdictional misunderstanding. Our employer commissioned us to locate and secure evidence of dimensional anomalies for scholarly documentation. We have no quarrel with temple authorities." "Your employer being?" Sword Maiden pressed. "A private collector of magical antiquities," the man replied with practiced smoothness. "Lord Vermilion of the Eastern Provinces. All perfectly legitimate, I assure you." Naruto caught the subtle shift in Sword Maiden's posture, recognition of the name, accompanied by something like concern. "Interesting," she remarked, her tone betraying nothing of her reaction. "Lord Vermilion's interest in dimensional studies isn't widely known. Recent scholarly pursuit," the leader supplied, "following reports of unusual phenomena in the northern regions." Dorn snorted skepticism. "Armed mercenaries with unregistered detection equipment make for unusual scholars. The wilderness presents dangers requiring security precautions," came the practiced response. Naruto had been quietly observing while extending his senses toward the captives. Something about the IR energy signatures continued to bother him, a subtle wrongness he couldn't precisely identify. "You still haven't explained why you're tracking dimensional energy specifically," he pointed out. "Or how you obtained equipment calibrated for such specialized detection." The leader's eyes narrowed, focusing on Naruto with renewed assessment. "You speak with unusual familiarity about dimensional energies for a simple escort." "Answer the question," Dorn interrupted, hand tightening on his sword hilt. Before the interrogation could continue, Naruto felt a sudden shift in the energy patterns surrounding the leader, a surge of something dark and disturbing that reminded him of the corruption he'd sensed in the hobgoblin during the previous battle. "Everyone back," he shouted, lunging forward to pull Sword Maiden away from the kneeling prisoner. His warning came barely in time. The leader's eyes rolled back, revealing whites that suddenly darkened with inky blackness. His body convulsed, as though being controlled by unseen strings, rising to stand despite his bound hands. "The Golden Sage awakens," emerged from the man's throat, a voice utterly unlike his natural speaking tone, resonating with unnatural harmonics. "The boundary weakens. The passage opens. The severed hand reaches through." Dark energy pulsed visibly around the possessed mercenary, causing the nearby Crystal Devi CES to shatter with sharp reports like breaking glass. The two conscious subordinates began screaming, their bodies undergoing similar transformations as the same dark energy engulfed them. What's happening to them? Dorn demanded, sword raised defensively. Some form of possession, Sword Maiden answered, her own staff raised as golden light began emanating from runes along its length. A Remo. Te entity speaking through prepared vessels. Naruto recognized the phenomenon from his experiences with Orochimaru's curse marks and other corrupting techniques. They were carriers, he realized. Quote, implanted with dormant energy that activated when specific conditions were met. The Golden Sage recognizes our methods, the unnatural voice continued, using all three possessed bodies to speak in disturbing synchronization. Knowledge from beyond, power from beyond, the barriers thin at your presence, Sage. You open the way for what follows. Naruto stepped forward, chakra swirling visibly around his hands. Who are you? What do you want? The possessed mercenaries tilted their heads at identical angles, a puppet-like movement that emphasized the external control manipulating them. We are the whisper beyond the veil. The hand reaching through the gap. The eyes that see between worlds. The voices rose in volume, resonating painfully against the surrounding rocks. You are catalyst and key, Sage. Your presence weakens the barriers. Your power calls to powers beyond. The dark energy surrounding the possessed men intensified, crackling with malevolent purpose as it began spreading toward their unconscious companions. It's trying to possess the others, Sword Maiden warned, stepping forward with her staff extended. Golden light erupted from the weapon as she spoke words in an ancient language, creating a barrier between the spreading corruption and its intended targets. Naruto recognized the immediate threat. Whatever entity controlled these men was attempting to expand its influence while simultaneously extracting information through this confrontation. Strategic response required both countering the immediate danger and limiting information exposure. I need to disrupt the connection, he decided. Hands forming seals in rapid succession. Sword Maiden, maintain your barrier. Dorn, Kel, get the unconscious ones clear of the corruption zone. As his companions moved to comply, Naruto gathered natural energy into his system, slipping partially into Sage mode without the full transformation. The familiar sensation of expanded awareness washed over him, revealing the structure of the possession technique more clearly, tendrils of dark energy extending from the possessed men toward some distant source, like puppet strings connecting to an unseen controller. There, he murmured, identifying the central nexus point where the corruption anchored itself within each host. Similar to breaking genjutsu, disrupting such connections required precise chakra injection at the correct juncture. He moved with sage-enhanced speed, appearing before the leader in a blur of motion. Before the possessed man could react, Naruto slammed an open palm against his chest, sending a carefully modulated pulse of chakra into the corruption's anchor point. Release, he commanded, using both physical and spiritual energy to shatter the connection. The effect was immediate and violent. Dark energy dispersed like smoke in strong wind, while the mercenary collapsed as though strings had been cut. Naruto repeated the process with the other two possessed men, each disruption causing visible ripples in the corruption attempting to spread throughout the area. As the final connection broke, an unearthly howl echoed across the landscape, not emerging from the mercenaries' throats but seeming to come from the very air around them. The remaining dark energy coalesced into a swirling vortex several feet above the ground, maintaining coherence for several seconds before dissipating with a final pulse of malevolent intent. Silence fell across the ridge as Naruto released his partial sage mode, turning to check on his companions. Everyone all right? He asked, noting with relief that Sword Maiden's barrier had successfully protected the unconscious captives from corruption. Unharmed, she confirmed, lowering her staff as the golden light faded. Though I belie, they are, jurisdictional misunderstanding, just became considerably more complex. Kel approached the fallen mercenary leader cautiously, checking his vital signs. Alive, but barely. Whatever that was, it nearly burned them out from inside. Will they recover? Dorn asked, keeping his sword ready despite the apparent end of immediate threat. Physically, perhaps, Sword Maiden answered, her tone grave. Spiritually, such possession leaves lasting damage to the soul's integrity. They'll require specialized healing at the temple. Naruto knelt beside the nearest fallen mercenary, examining the residual energy patterns with trained perception. The possession was prepared in advance, he observed. These men were conditioned to serve as temporary vessels if they encountered specific trigger conditions. And those conditions included meeting us, Sword Maiden concluded. Or more specifically, meeting you. She turned toward Naruto. It called you, the Golden Sage, and claimed your presence weakens dimensional barriers. Quote, Naruto frowned, considering the implications. It knew about me, which means either my arrival has been noticed by whatever entities exist beyond this world's boundaries, or someone in this world informed them, Dorn finished grimly. We should move quickly, Kel advised, glancing at the sky. This location is compromised, and we're losing daylight. The old watchtower is defensible and warded against scrying. What about them? Dorn gestured toward the unconscious mercenaries. We cannot leave them, Sword Maiden decided. Their condition requires treatment, and they may provide valuable information once recovered. We'll take them to the watchtower and send for temple healers. The logistics of transporting 7 incapacitated men only 4 horses presented a significant challenge, but Naruto's shadow clones solved the problem efficiently. With 3 clones assisting, they secured the mercenaries on improvised stretchers and resumed their journey toward the watchtower, maintaining vigilant watch for additional threats. The old watchtower loomed against the darkening sky, its weathered stone structure blending with the rocky outcropping upon which it stood. Originally built during border conflicts centuries earlier, it had been maintained as an emergency shelter for travelers and patrol outposts. Its solid constructee, on and strategic position overlooking 3 converging valleys made it an ideal defensive position. Inside, the circular main chamber provided adequate space for their expanded party. Kel expertly repaired the ancient hearth while Dorn secured the heavy wooden door and checked arrow slits for defensive positioning. Naruto's shadow clones arranged the unconscious mercenaries along one wall, placing them on bedrolls with basic medical attention to their needs. Sword Maiden moved methodically around the perimeter, activating dormant ward symbols carved into the stone walls. As her fingers traced each marking, soft golden light briefly illuminated the ancient runes before fading to a subtle glow visible only to those who knew to look for it. These wards will prevent remote scrying and OBS. Cure our presence from detection techniques, she explained as she completed the circuit. They won't stop physical pursuit, but they'll prevent our friend from eavesdropping through its former vessels. Naruto observed her work with interest, noting similarities between these protection techniques and certain sealing methods from his world. The symbols resemble chakra flow patterns, he commented, directing and containing energy along specific pathways. She nodded, seeming unsurprised by his insight. The oldest magic systems in our world follow natural energy currents rather than imposing artificial constructs. Modern practitioners have largely abandoned these methods in favor of more directed, controlled techniques. Sacrificing harmony for power, Naruto observed. Precisely. Something in her tone suggested personal significance to this observation. The temple preserves these older approaches alongside newer developments. Balance rather than replacement. As evening settled over the mountain landscape, they established watch rotations and shared a simple meal prepared from their provisions. The unconscious mercenaries showed no signs of immediate recovery, though the IR conditions had stabilized under Naruto and Sword Maiden's combined efforts. During a quiet moment while Kel and Dorn discussed route options for the following day, Sword Maiden approached Naruto. At his position by one of the arrow slits, where he had been watching the moonlight transform the valley below into a silver-washed dreamscape. The technique you used to break the possession, she began without preamble. It wasn't conventional exorcism methodology. Naruto nodded. In my world, we encounter various forms of mental and spiritual intrusion. Disrupting such techniques requires identifying the connection point and applying counter pressure with precisely modulated chakra. You mentioned chakra before, she noted. It appears similar to what we call life energy, yet your application methods differ significantly from our magical practices. Everyone in my world possesses chakra, Naruto explained. It's the combination of physical and spiritual energy that flows through specialized pathways in the body. With training, it can be molded and directed for various techniques. Including creating physical duplicates of yourself, she observed with the hint of a smile. Shadow clones are my specialty. Naruto acknowledged, returning her smile. They're fully independent copies, capable of autonomous action, though they disperse if they take significant damage. Sword Maiden considered this, her head tilted in that particular way that suggested she was processing information beyond simple hearing. Despite her blindfold, Naruto had noticed her exceptional spatial awareness and responsiveness to her environment. Your world's understanding of energy manipulation seems more democratized than ours, she observed thoughtfully. Here, magical aptitude is relatively rare, requiring innate talent further developed through formalized training. Most people never access such abilities directly. That creates power imbalances, Naruto noted, thinking of how chakra access in his world, while requiring training, was fundamentally available to anyone willing to develop the necessary discipline. Indeed, the history of our realm is largely shaped by such imbalances, she confirmed. Those with magical aptitude dominating those without, followed by periods of revolution and redistribution, only for new magical elites to eventually emerge. Their conversity, on paused as one of the mercenaries stirred, moaning softly before subsiding back into unconsciousness. Sword Maiden moved to check his condition, her hands moving with practiced efficiency to assess vital signs. The possession's grip is fading, she reported. This one may regain consciousness by morning. The leader will take longer, the connection was strongest through him. She returned to Naruto's side, her expression thoughtful beneath her veil. I have a theory regarding your arrival that today's events seem to support. I'm listening, Naruto encouraged. The entity that spoke through. These men referred to you as catalyst and key, she began. It claimed your presence weakens dimensional barriers. What if your nature, your specific energy composition, resonates with the boundary between worlds in ways that normal beings don't? Naruto considered this. Because of my sage abilities, you mean? The harmonization with natural energy. Partially, she acknowledged, but I suspect there's more. During your healing demonstration yesterday, I sensed something unusual within your energy signature. A secondary presence, contained yet integrated. Her perception impressed Naruto. Very few people in his own world could detect Kurama's presence without being directly informed. You're right, he confirmed after brief consideration. I share my body with an entity called Kurama, a tailed beast of immense chakra. We're partners, not host and parasite. His energy combines with mine for certain techniques. Sword Maiden absorbed this revelation with remarkable composure. A being of power dwelling within a human vessel, yet in harmony rather than domination. Fascinating. She paused thoughtfully. In our theology, such arrangements exist only in legend. God touched he rose from the founding era who carried divine fragments within their mortal forms. Kurama's not divine, Naruto clarified with a small smile. Powerful and ancient, yes, but he'd be the first to reject godhood. He's grumpy enough without that kind of responsibility. A genuine laugh escaped Sword Maiden, a sound Naruto suspected was rare given her usual composed demeanor. The momentary lightness transformed her features, revealing the person beneath the formal priestess role. I begin to understand why conventional categorizations fail to define you, she said, humor still warming her voice. Which brings me back to my theory. What if entities beyond our dimensional boundaries are attracted to unusual energy signatures like yours precisely because they represent potential doorways between realms? The implication settled heavily between them. You think my presence here isn't accidental, Naruto stated. That something deliberately pulled me through during that ritual. Or that something recognized an opportunity when the ritual created initial instability, she suggested. The cultists you encountered upon arrival were attempting to summon an entity. Perhaps when dimensional barriers briefly weakened, your unique signature acted as a beacon that drew you through instead of their intended target. And now whatever they were trying to contact has noticed me, Naruto concluded grimly. It would explain the resources being deployed to locate you, both by this, Lord Vermilion, and whatever entity spoke through his agents. Sword Maiden's expression became grave once more. If this theory proves correct, the abandoned temple we're investigating takes on new significance. It may not be coincidence that dimensional disturbances are occurring at a site originally dedicated to boundary magic. Their conversation was interrupted by Dorn approaching for watch rotation. As Sword Maiden moved to prepare her bedroll, she paused briefly beside Naruto. Rest well, Golden Sage, she said softly. Tomorrow may demand all our resources. Naruto's dreams that night were fragmented and unsettling. Images from his past blended with unfamiliar landscapes. Konoha's familiar. Streets dissolved into ancient stone corridors lined with symbols that pulsed with malevolent purpose. Familiar faces. Sakura, Kakashi, Sasuke, called to him across increasing distance, their voices fading as darkness swallowed them. Throughout these disjointed scenes, a constant whispering persisted just below comprehension, voices speaking words that seemed significant yet remained frustratingly indecipherable. He awoke before dawn, meditation replacing further attempts at rest. Within his mindscape, Kurama stirred from his usual dormant state during Naruto's dimensional displacement. Interesting developments, the fox observed, his massive form stretching lazily. This world's natural energy feels different, older somehow, less structured than ours. You've been quiet since we arrived, Naruto noted. Conserving strength. Quote. Observing, Kurama corrected. Our connection weakened during transition between dimensions. I've been re-establishing stability rather than interfering with your adaptation process. What do you make of what happened yesterday? The possession technique and that entity's interest in us. The fox's massive tail swayed thoughtfully, reminiscent of certain summoning techniques from our world. But with key differences. The control mechanism seems more parasitic than cooperative, forcing submission rather than establishing contract. Like Orochimaru's curse marks, Naruto suggested. Similar principle, different methodology, Kurama agreed. What concerns me is the specific interest in your sage abilities. Something about the natural energy harmonization process attracts attention from whatever exists beyond this realm's boundaries. Their internal conversation continued as dawn gradually illuminated the watchtower's interior. By the time the others stirred, Naruto had formulated several theories about the connection between sage mode and dimensional boundaries, with Kurama's insights providing valuable perspective from his centuries of experience. Outside, morning mist clung to the valleys below, creating an ethereal landscape of mountain islands floating in a white sea. Kel prepared a simple breakfast while Dorn checked on their prisoners, reporting that two had shown signs of returning consciousness during his watch. The leader's still unresponsive, he noted, but his breathing steadier. The others might be coherent enough for questioning soon. Sword Maiden emerged from her meditations, the subtle glow of her morning prayers fading as she joined the group. She had replaced her formal veil with a simpler cloth band across her eyes. Her hair braided practically for travel. The transformation from ceremonial priestess to practical field operative continued to intrigue Naruto, two aspects of the same person, each authentic in its context. Good morning, she greeted, accepting a cup of strong tea from Kel. Any developments overnight? Nothing approached the tower, Naruto reported. Though my dreams were unusual. Voices trying to communicate something important, but just beyond comprehension. She nodded, unsurprised. This region has always been associated with prophetic dreams and visions. The Innis between worlds affects dreamers particularly strongly. Their morning preparations were interrupted by a commotion from the mercenaries' position. One had fully regained consciousness and was struggling against his restraints, panic evident in his expression. Let me go, he gasped, eyes wild with fear. It's still there, waiting, watching through my eyes. Sword Maiden moved swiftly to his side, placing a calming hand on his forehead. The connection is broken, she assured him, golden light briefly flaring around her fingers. You're free of its influence. The man stared at her veiled face, recognition gradually replacing panic. Temple priestess, he breathed. Thank the gods, I couldn't stop it, couldn't control anything, like being locked in a dark room while something else wore my skin. What's your name? She asked gently. Tomas, he replied, body gradually relaxing under her continued touch. Hired sword from Westmarch, 7 years mercenary work, but nothing like this before. What do you remember about your employer? Naruto asked, approaching carefully to avoid re-triggering the man's panic. Tomas's brow furrowed with concentration. Lord Vermilion, hired us through standard guild channels. Legitimate contract, good pay. Said he needed security for scholars researching old ruins. His expression darkened, but when we reached his estate for briefing, something changed. They took us to a chamber beneath the main house. There were symbols on the walls, chanting in some old language. After that, memories get strange. Like watching someone else control my actions. Conditioning ritual, Sword Maiden identified, exchanging significant glances with Naruto. Preparing vessels for remote possession. Do you remember your mission objectives? Dorn pressed, his tone professional but not unkind. Find energy traces matching specific patterns, Tomas recalled haltingly. Secure any artifacts with similar signatures. Capture anyone demonstrating unusual abilities. Especially anyone who could create duplicates of themselves or manipulate natural energy directly. His gaze fixed on Naruto with sudden clarity. You were the primary target. They knew you were coming this way somehow. Said you were the key to opening the door. This confirmation of Sword Maiden's theory sent a chill through the group. Someone had anticipated their expedition and prepared an interception force specifically designed to capture Naruto. How did they know our route? Kel wondered aloud. This path ain't on any standard maps. And how did they know about my abilities? Naruto added, I've only demonstrated them publicly once, during the Goblin attack. Sword Maiden's expression hardened with concern. Information moves quickly when valuable enough. Someone in Frontier Town must have connections to Lord Vermilion's organization. Or your temple has leaks, Dorn suggested carefully. Only they knew our exact destination and purpose. The possibility created momentary tension, but Sword Maiden nodded acknowledgement. A valid concern. Even sacred institutions aren't immune to infiltration, particularly in matters involving dimensional boundaries. Certain factions within the temple itself have controversial views on such matters. Their strategy session was interrupted by another mercenary regaining consciousness, this one calmer than Tomas. Though visibly disoriented, within the hour, 5 of the 7 had recovered sufficiently for basic conversation, each confirming elements of Tomas's account while adding personal data. ILS that painted a disturbing picture of systematic preparation. They had detailed descriptions of your abilities, confirmed an older mercenary named Halson. Drawings of hand signs you supposedly use. Descriptions of the Golden Eye transformation, even analysis of your energy manipulation techniques. Which means they've been observing you since arrival, Sword Maiden concluded. Possibly Ruff the cultists you encountered during the original ritual. The mercenaries' leader remained unconscious, his condition more serious due to serving as primary vessel for the possessing entity. The remaining unconscious man showed signs of severe mental trauma, responding to stimuli but unable to achieve full consciousness. We can't continue to our destination with 7 additional people, 5 of whom require medical attention. Dorn observed practically. Agreed, Sword Maiden acknowledged. Kel, is there a viable route to send them back to Frontier Town with reasonable safety? The guide considered. The Eastern Trail connects to the trade road about half-day's travel from here. Once there, they'd likely encounter regular merchant traffic or patrols. I can assist with that, Naruto offered. My shadow clones can escort them to the trade road, ensuring they reach safety without depleting our own numbers. The solution proved acceptable to all parties. Naruto created 6 shadow clones with sufficient chakra reserves to maintain their existence for the required duration. While his companions prepared to resume their journey toward the abandoned temple, the clones organized the mercenaries for travel, constructing improvised stretchers for the 2 who remained unconscious. As the rescue party prepared to depart, Tomas approached Naruto with visible hesitation. I need to warn you, he said quietly. Whatever's controlling Lord Vermilion, it's not just interested in capturing you. The chamber where they performed the conditioning ritual had drawings, plans for some kind of extraction procedure. He swallowed hard. They want to remove something from inside you. The implication sent a cold certainty through Naruto. Kurama, he murmured. They're after the tailed beast's chakra. Tomas nodded grimly. They called it the Golden Power, and said it was key to permanent breach of the boundary. This final piece of intelligence cemented the growing picture. You're not merely interest in Naruto's sage abilities, but specific knowledge of and plans for Kurama's unique chakra. The parallels to Akatsuki's extraction plans from his own world were disturbing in their familiarity. After the mercenaries departed with their clone escorts, the main party resumed their journey toward the abandoned temple with renewed urgency and caution. The terrain grew increasingly NGLY challenging as they ascended higher into the mountains, following ancient pathways that had once served pilgrims seeking the Boundary Temple's wisdom. By midday, they had entered a region where the natural landscape itself seemed subtly altered. Vegetation grew in unusual patterns, with plants that shouldn't coexist in the same climate zone flourishing side by side. Wildlife behaved strangle-why, birds flying in perfectly geometric formations, small mammals watching their passage with unnatural stillness and intelligence. The boundary thins here, Sword Maiden explained as they navigated a particularly strange meadow where flowers bloomed and withered in visible cycles matching their footsteps. Natural laws become more suggestive than mandatory. It will intensify as we approach the temple site. Is that why this path was abandoned? Naruto asked, noting how Shadow seemed increasingly nervous, requiring constant reassurance. Kel nodded gravely. Local legends say travelers would sometimes return, changed. Not in ways you could immediately identify, but fundamentally altered. Some reported missing time or memories of places that don't exist. Dimensional bleed through, Sword Maiden confirmed. Consciousness briefly slipping between adjacent realities. The ancients considered it sacred enlightenment, glimpses beyond the veil. Modern authorities classified it as Dan Giroux's mental contamination and restricted access. The trail narrowed as they entered a high mountain pass where the rock itself displayed unusual properties, veins of minerals that seemed to shift position when viewed peripherally. Stone faces that appeared to contain fossil impressions that rearranged into different forms upon closer examination. We're getting close, Dorn observed, voice UNC. Onsisly lowered as though to avoid attracting attention. The distortion effects are intensifying. Naruto felt it too, a peculiar resonance with his sage abilities, as though the natural energy he reflowed according to unfamiliar patterns. Within him, Kurama stirred uneasily, the fox's senses detecting subtle wrongness in their surroundings. Be careful with sage mode here, the tailed beast cautioned. The natural energy feels contaminated somehow, not dangerous exactly, but altered in ways I don't recognize. The warning proved timely. As they crested the final ridge, the abandoned temple came into view, and with it, confirmation that their journey would not conclude with simple reconnaissance. The ancient structure sprawled across a plateau nestled between three mountain peaks. Its architecture an impossible blend of styles that seemed to incorporate elements from different historical periods simultaneously. Domes, spires, colonnades and arches coexisted in arrangements that challenged conventional geometry, creating an unsettling impression of a building not entirely anchored to physical reality. More concerning than the architecture was the activity surrounding it. A substantial encampment had been established in the outer courtyard, at least 30 individuals in organized patterns suggesting military discipline rather than archaeological research. Equipment of O.B.vious magical purpose had been arranged in concentric circles around the temple's main entrance, where pulsing energy formed visible distortions in the air itself. By the Earth Mother, Sword Maiden breathed. Her normally composed voice tightened with alarm. They've already begun the breach attempt. Kel produced a spyglass, scanning the encampment with professional assessment. Mercenary guards on the perimeter. Robed figures operating the equipment, magic users of some kind. And at the center, he paused, adjusting the spyglass for better focus. Someone important. Elaborate armor, commanding position. Matches descriptions of Lord Vermilion from what I can see at this distance. Let me see, Naruto requested, taking the offered spyglass. He studied the encampment methodically. Is tactical training automatically identifying defensive positions, command structures, and operational patterns? The central figure immediately captured his attention. Tall, imposing, wearing ornate armor that incorporated unusual crystalline components similar to the mercenaries' tracking devices. More concerning was the aura visible even at this distance to Naruto's enhanced perception, a darn SS surrounding the figure that pulsed in patterns matching the energy distortions at the temple entrance. That's not entirely Lord Vermilion anymore, Naruto observed grimly. He's undergoing the Saw-Me possession process we saw in the mercenaries, but far more advanced. Integration rather than temporary control. A willing vessel, Sword Maiden concluded, her expression grim beneath her veil. One who accepted the entity's influence in exchange for power. They're attempting to stabilize and expand the natural dimensional weak point, Naruto continued, focusing on the equipment arrangement. Those devices are amplifying and directing energy to wear down the boundary at its thinnest point. Dorn's expression darkened. This goes beyond unauthorized exploration or relic hunting. T.'s active attempt to breach dimensional seals. High treason under kingdom law, Kel added. And heresy under temple doctrine. Sword Maiden stood perfectly still, her posture suggesting intense concentration. I sense at least 3 distinct magical disciplines at work: conventional arcane manipulation, blood ritualism, and corrupted boundary magic. They're combining methodologies that should be theoretically incompatible. Because they're being guided by something with knowledge beyond conventional magical theory, Naruto suggested. The entity controlling Vermilion provides expertise from outside this world's understanding. The strategic implications settled heavily upon the small group. They faced a force that substantially outnumbered them, with unknown magical capabilities. Engaged in a complex operation already in progress. Options. Dorn asked practically, hand resting on his sword hilt. Retreat and report, Kel suggested immediately. This requires kingdom-level military response. Possibly with temple support, beyond our capabilities to address directly. By the time such forces mobilize and reach this location, the breach may be complete, Sword Maiden countered. Hours matter when dimensional boundaries are concerned, not days. We could disrupt their operation, Naruto offered. Not direct confrontation, but targeted sabotage of key components. My shadow clones could approach from multiple directions, create confusion, and disable the equipment maintaining the boundary manipulation. Risky, Dorn assessed. Once they detect interference, they'll accelerate their timeline. We'd need perfect execution with no margin for error. Sword Maiden turned toward Naruto, her veiled face impossible to read but her posture conveying intensity. Avenue the most experience with dimensional phenomena. What happens if they succeed? Naruto considered the question carefully, drawing on his experiences with Kagaya and other dimensional threats from his world. Best case scenario, they open a small, temporary passage that allows limited transit between dimensions, probably enabling the controlling entity to physically manifest rather than working through vessels, he began. Worst case, yes, she prompted when he hesitated. Worst case, they destabilize the dimensional boundaries beyond containment, creating cascading failures that uncontrolled bleed through between multiple realities simultaneously. His expression darkened with the weight of the possibility. Imagine what we're experiencing in this strange zone, but expanding outward uncontrollably. Rewriting the fundamental rules of reality as it spreads. The gravity of this assessment brought momentary silence to the group. Then observation is not an option, Sword Maiden decided. Nor is retreat. We must act, however overwhelming the odds. I agree, Naruto said. But we need more information before committing to specific approach. Let me send shadow clones to gather intelligence on their exact procedures and identify critical vulnerabilities. The strategy approved, Naruto created 3 shadow clones transformed to blend with the environment. They RTED on separate paths toward the encampment, instructed to prioritize information gathering over intervention unless absolutely necessary. While waiting for the clones' reports, the group withdrew to a more concealed position where they could observe without risk of detection. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the mountain landscape as they prepared equipment and discussed contingency plans for various scenarios. During a quiet moment while Dorn and Kel scouted the immediate perimeter, Sword Maiden approached Naruto at his observation position. There's something I haven't shared, she began without preamble. Her voice pitched for privacy. Something relevant to our current situation. Naruto turned toward her, noting the subtle tension in her normally composed posture. I'm listening, he encouraged gently. My scars, she said, one hand unconsciously rising toward her veiled eyes. When I mentioned being captured by goblins, I didn't elaborate on the circumstances. She paused, gathering resolve for difficult disclosure. I was investigating reports of unusual goblin behavior, organized raids targeting specific locations rather than opportunistic attacks. My part, why traced their movements to an ancient site similar to this one, though smaller in scale. The parallel to current events hung unspoken between them. We discovered the goblins were being influenced by something dwelling within the ruins, an entity that could project its will through prepared vessels. Her voice remained steady through obvious effort. My companions were killed. I was taken captive and prepared to serve as a more sophisticated vessel than the goblins could provide. Naruto maintained respectful silence, recognizing the courage required for this disclosure. They took my eyes as part of the preparation ritual, she continued. The blindness was symbolic as much as practical, removing my ability to perceive reality through conventional means, making me more receptive to alternative awareness. Her hands clasped tightly together. I was rescued before the final binding could occur, but the experience left me uniquely sensitive to dimensional disturbances. That's how you became a priestess after being an adventurer, Naruto realized. The temple recognized your sensitivity. She nodded. The temple had been monitoring that site. Their intervention saved me, though too late for my companions. Afterward, they offered training to help me understand and manage my altered perceptions. And now you can sense dimensional energies directly, Naruto concluded, understanding the significance of her revelation. That's why you specifically were sent to investigate reports of dimensional breaches. Yes, she turned toward the distant temple, her veiled face somehow conveying intense focus despite covered eyes. What I sense now is identical to what I experienced during my captivity, the same entity reaching through, using the same methodologies, only on much larger scale. The personal connection transformed their mission from abstract threat to deeply specific confrontation. Whatever entity controlled Lord Vermilion was the same one that had traumatized Sword Maiden years earlier. This isn't just about preventing dimensional catastrophe for you, Naruto observed gently. It's about confronting something that caused profound personal trauma. Is that so different from your situation? She countered with unexpected insight. This entity seeks the power within you, Kurama's energy, just as others did in your world. The parallel struck Naruto forcefully. They each faced echoes of their deepest wounds, her captivity and torture, his lifetime of being hunted for the power he contained. We're both fighting old battles in new forms, he acknowledged. Perhaps that's why our paths converged, she suggested. The boundary between worlds recognized kindred warriors and brought us together at this critical juncture. Before Naruto could respond, the first shadow clone dispelled, sending a rush of intelligence flowing into his consciousness. The other clones followed moments later, their combined observations forming a comprehensive assessment of the situation below. We have a problem, he announced as Dorn and Kel returned from their perimeter check. They're much further along than we initially assessed. The boundary disto, RTION has already reached stage 3 integrity failure. Meaning, Dorn prompted. Meaning they've created a stable passage large enough for consciousness transfer but not physical transit, Sword Maiden translated. Her expertise evident. The next phase would allow material objects and eventually living beings to cross between dimensions. That's not all, Naruto continued grimly. They're using captives as focus points for the energy, 3 villagers from nearby settlements, held in containment fields that are gradually draining their life force to power the breach. This information transformed their strategic calculation from disruption to rescue mission. Innocent lives now hung in the balance alongside the larger dimensional threat. Time frame, Kel asked practically. Hours, not days, Naruto confirmed. They're accelerating their process. My clones overheard discussion of the vessel's preparation. Apparently Lord Vermilion is undergoing final modifications to serve as primary anchor for whatever's coming through. Then we move now, Sword Maiden decided, her voice taking on the clear authority of command experience. Naruto, can your shadow clones create suffici and diversion to draw attention from the main ritual site? Absolutely, he confirmed. I can create enough to simulate attack from multiple directions simultaneously. Dorn, you and I will target the captives' containment fields while their attention is divided, she continued. Kel, your knowledge of ancient structures may help identify critical support points within the temple itself. If we can't stop the ritual directly, destabilizing the physical structure might disrupt the energy alignment. The plan took shape quickly, each member contributing tactical expertise from their respective backgrounds. Naruto would create a substantial clone force to simulate larger attack, drawing defenders away from critical positions. Sword Maiden and Dorn would focus on rescuing captives and disrupting the central ritual components. Kel would target structural vulnerabilities to create secondary chaos and potential escape routes. As sunset approached, casting the mountain landscape in deepening shadows, they moved into position along separate approach vectors. The temple's outer courtyard buzzed with activity as robed figures made final adjustments to equipment while mercenary guards maintained watchful perimeter. At the center of it all stood Lord Vermilion, or the entity increasingly controlling his form. Even at this distance, Naruto could sense the wrongness emanating from the nobleman. His physical form subtly altered by the possession process. Crystalline growths had begun emerging from his skin at joints and along his spine, glowing with the same purplish energy as the dimensional distortion above the temple entrance. "Ready?" Naruto asked quietly through the communication method they'd established, a small fragment of his chakra temporarily shared with each team member, allowing limited sensation sharing over distance. 3 confirmations returned through the link. Sword Maidens carried additional emotional weight, determination layered over controlled fear, response of someone confronting profound trauma with resolute courage. Beginning diversion, Naruto announced, hands forming his signature cross seal. Multiple shadow clones burst into existence. Around the perimeter, not the handful he typically employed but dozens, transformed to appear as a diverse force of attackers. They emerged from multiple directions simultaneously, creating impression of coordinated assault by conventional military force. The response was immediate and predictable. Mercenary guards rushed to defensive positions while alarm spread through the encampment. Magical defenses activated, producing shimmering barriers around key equipment. Lord Vermilion himself moved toward higher ground, barking commands that reorganized his forces with disturbing efficiency. Amid the chaos, Naruto infiltrated from the eastern approach, using transformation technique to blend with panicked support personnel. Sword Maiden and Dorn advanced from the north, using natural cover and the diversion to approach the captives, position undetected. Kel circled toward the temple's ancient foundations, his knowledge of architectural vulnerabilities guiding him toward critical structural points. The plan progressed smoothly until an unexpected complication arose. As Naruto approached the central ritual area, he felt a sudden shift in the dimensional energy, a focusing of power that rippled across the courtyard. Above the temple entrance, the distortion swirled more rapidly, colors shifting from purple to deep crimson. Through his clone network, Naruto perceived the reason for this change. Lord Vermilion stood at the heart of the ritual configuration, arms outstretched as crystalline growths across his body pulsed with intensifying light. His voice, now overlaid with unnatural resonance, carried across the courtyard in a language Naruto didn't recognize but instinctively understood as dimensional invocation. The diversion accelerated their timeline, Naruto realized with alarm. They're initiating final breach now rather than risk interruption. He transmitted this intelligence through their connection as he changed approach vectors, abandoning stealth for direct intervention. The containment fields holding the captives had begun pulsing more rapidly, their life energy visibly draining toward the central distortion. Sword Maiden received his warning and adjusted accordingly, her movement taking on unprecedented urgency. She reached the first containment field seconds ahead of schedule, staff striking the generator with precise force that disrupted its energy pattern. Golden light erupted from runic inscriptions along the weapon's length, countering the field's purple glow with opposing frequency. Dorn simultaneously engaged the guards protecting the remaining captives, his swordsmanship demonstrating why he held emerald rank despite his youth. Each strike found vulnerable points in his opponent's defenses, disabling rather than killing when possible but unhesitating when necessary. As the first captive collapsed from his containment field, Sword Maiden caught the weakened villager while maintaining her staff's disruptive energy against the equipment. The interruption to the energy flow created visible instability in the central distortion, its swirling pattern faltering momentarily before re-establishing with increased intensity. Lord Vermilion, or the entity controlling him, immediately perceived the threat. His head snapped toward Sword Maiden's position with unnatural speed, eyes now completely blackened with dimensional energy. "The Blind One returns," emerged from his throat in that same resonant voice they had heard through the possessed mercenaries. "The failed vessel seeks to interfere again." Recognition flashed across Sword Maiden's features, confirmation of her suspicion that this entity was indeed the same one responsible for her captivity years earlier. Her posture stiffened momentarily before resolute determination replaced momentary fear. "Your influence ends here," she declared, voice carrying surprising power across the chaotic courtyard. "This realm rejects your presence." The entity's laughter echoed with distorted harmonics. "This vessel welcomes me, unlike you who fought the blessing. And now the Golden Sage has come, bearing the key we sought all along." Its attention shifted toward Naruto, who had disabled 3 mercenary guards while advancing toward the central platform. The recognition in its voice confirmed their worst suspicions. Naruto's arrival had been anticipated, perhaps even facilitated, by whatever intelligence directed this operation. "The 9-tailed power walks between worlds," it continued, genuine excitement distorting its host's features into unnatural expression. "The boundary breaker. The living bridge." Within Naruto, Kurama stirred with growing concern. "It knows what I am," the fox observed. "Specifically targeted knowledge, not general awareness." "Who are you?" Naruto demanded, advancing steadily despite magical barriers attempting to impede his progress. "What do you want with this world?" The possessed Vermilion spread his arms wider as crystalline growths continued expanding across his body. "We are the Whisper King. The sovereign of spaces between. Collector of realms and harvester of powers." Each title emerged with increasing resonance, the dimensional distortion above pulsing in rhythm with the words. "Your world expelled us. This world will welcome us. The power you carry will bridge our return to all realms simultaneously." The name triggered recognition in Sword Maiden, who had freed the second captive and now advanced toward the final containment field. "The Whisper King is myth," she called, staff deflecting magical assault Fr. A robed cultist who attempted to block her path. "A cautionary legend used to warn against dimensional tampering. All gods begin as myths, little priestess," came the mocking response. "Until they manifest and demand worship." The situation deteriorated rapidly as the entity channeled increasing power through Vermilion's transformed body. The dimensional distortion expanded, tendrils of Mson energy lashing out to form connections with equipment throughout the courtyard. Cultists began chanting in synchronized cadence, their voices merging into harmonic pattern that strengthened the breach. Naruto recognized the critical moment approaching, the transition from containable incident to catastrophic breach. He abandoned conventional approach tactics and gathered chakra for direct intervention. Golden energy visibly swirling around his body. "Kurama," he communicated internally. "We need to disrupt the dimensional frequency directly." "Dangerous," the fox cautioned. "Our chakra may accelerate the breach rather than closing it if applied incorrectly." "Then we'll harmonize with the natural energy first," Naruto decided. Sage mode to identify the correct counter frequency, Hen targeted Rasengan variants to disrupt key nodes. As Naruto began gathering natural energy, the process revealed unexpected difficulty. The area's distorted energy patterns resisted normal harmonization, flowing according to alien patterns that his trained senses struggled to interpret. Meanwhile, Sword Maiden had reached the third captive, her staff's golden energy battling purple containment fields with increasing strain. Dorn fought with remarkable skill against overwhelming numbers, his sword a constant blur of motion as he protected their position. Kel had successfully identified structural vulnerabilities and begun leveraging them to create distractions and escape routes. The possessed Vermilion focused his attention on Naruto, black eyes narrowing with calculation as he RVED the beginning of sage transformation. "Yes," he hissed with satisfaction. "Call upon the natural energy. Open yourself to the flow between worlds. You make our task easier, sage." The warning triggered Naruto's combat instincts. He immediately altered his approach, recognizing the trap inherent in conventional sage mode within this distorted environment. Instead, he drew more heavily on Kurama's chakra, golden energy replacing the usual orange pigmentation around his eyes. Change of plans, he communicated to his companions. Direct confrontation with the central entity. Sword Maiden, complete the captive rescue. Dorn, Kel, prepare for rapid extraction on my signal. Without waiting for acknowledgement, Naruto launched himself toward the central platform where Vermilion stood, Elden chakra forming around his body in the distinctive pattern of Kurama's influence. The speed and power of his movement caught even the possessed nobleman by surprise, momentarily disrupting the ritual's cadence. Whatever you're attempting to bring through stays on its side of the boundary, Naruto declared, chakra coalescing around his right hand in spiraling pattern. This world isn't yours to harvest. The Rasengan that formed was unlike his standard technique, larger, with golden energy swirling in complex patterns that mirrored the dimensional distortion while reversing its frequency. Kurama's chakra provided the raw power, while Naruto's precision control shaped it for maximum effectiveness against the specific threat. Fascinating adaptation, the Whisper King observed through Vermilion's transformed mouth. Genuine interest coloring its tone despite the imminent attack. You truly are unique among vessels. The entity made no move to evade, instead extending crystalline varied arms as though welcoming Naruto's approach. The reason became apparent as Naruto's Rasengan impacted. Instead of destroying the crystalline growths, the energy seemed to be absorbed and redirected into the dimensional distortion, accelerating rather than disrupting the breach. Your power feeds us regardless of intent, the entity explained with malicious satisfaction. Attack or surrender, the outcome remains identical. The boundary thins wherever your energy touches it. This revelation confirms Sword Maiden's theory with disturbing finality. Naruto's unique chakra nature resonated with H-dimensional boundaries in ways that could be exploited. The entity had anticipated this, perhaps even engineered his arrival specifically for this purpose. As the golden chakra continued flowing into the distortion, Naruto found himself unable to break the connection. The Rasengan had created an energy bridge that now existed independently of his intention, drawing on his chakra reserves without consent. Within his mindscape, Kurama growled with recognition. It's similar to chakra extraction techniques used by the Akatsuki, the fox observed. But targeting dimensional resonance patterns rather than the tailed beast directly. Sword Maiden sensed the danger immediately. Abandoning her position by the final captive, she rushed toward Naruto, staff raised as golden light intensified along its length. Ancient words of power emerged from her lips, not the formal prayers of her temple role but older invocations that predated current religious structures. Boundary hold. Worlds remain divided. Passages sealed by ancient compact. Each phrase emerged with increasing resonance, the golden light from her staff expanding to form counterbalance to the crimson energy swirling above. Her intervention created brief opportunity that Naruto immediately recognized. While the entity focused on maintaining its extraction technique, its control over Vermilion's transformed body momentarily weakened. Naruto capitalized on this opening, altering his chakra flow from external projection to internal reinforcement. Kurama, reverse the flow, he instructed, mental connection with the fox allowing instantaneous coordination. The golden chakra surrounding Naruto pulsed once, then began flowing inward rather than outward. The extraction connection faltered as its energy source suddenly became receiver instead of transmitter. For crucial seconds, the dimensional distortion's expansion paused as the entity struggled to maintain control of both the breach and its vessel simultaneously. Sword Maiden's counter ritual gained momentum in that opening, her staff's golden energy forming structured patterns that imposed order on the chaotic dimensional energies. Each word of her ancient invocation seemed to physically impact the distortion, forcing its expansive tendrils to contract toward their origin point. The Whisper King's frustration manifested as visible darkness spreading across Vermilion's transformed features. The prize will not be denied, it snarled, abandoning finesse for raw power application. Crystalline growths across Vermilion's body shattered as the entity channeled destructive energy directly through its vessel. The nobleman's physical form began deteriorating under this assault, flesh blackening around crystal anchor points as the possession consumed its host in desperate attempt to maintain the breach. Fall back, Naruto shouted to his companions, recognizing the imminent catastrophic failure. It's sacrificing the vessel. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.